Picture this. It's 1995. You walk into a movie theater, settle into your seat, and for the next 3 hours, Martin Scorsese takes you on a guided tour through the most glamorous, most corrupt, most dangerously seductive city on the planet. Las Vegas. Not the Vegas of magic shows and all-you-can-eat buffets, but the Vegas where the real money moved in the dark, where the mob owned the counting rooms, where a man could run an empire without his name ever appearing on a single legal document. Casino arrived in November with Robert De Niro playing Sam Ace Rothstein, a gambling genius so meticulous he treated a misplaced decimal like a federal emergency. Joe Pesci as Nicky Santoro, a man whose solution to every problem, every single one, involved either threats or violence, usually both. And Sharon Stone as Ginger McKenna, a woman so luminously self-destructive she could walk into a room full of dangerous men and make every one of them feel like the reckless one. The film clocked in at just under 3 hours, featured more profanity than most people hear in a lifetime, cost around $52 million to produce, and went on to gross nearly $116 million worldwide. But here's the thing about Casino that separates it from nearly every other crime epic ever committed to film. Almost all of it actually happened. Today we're pulling back the velvet curtain on 15 facts about Casino that most people have never heard. The real stories behind the violence, the wardrobe decisions that cost a small fortune, the casting battles that nearly derailed the whole production, and a true-life car bombing so absurd it sounds like fiction. So stay with us, because the table is set and every single chip on it is a verified, documented piece of cinema history. Let's open with the scene that has probably haunted more casual viewers of Casino than any other single moment in the film. Nicky Santoro, played by Pesci with that uniquely unsettling calm that makes him so terrifying, tightens a metal vise around a man's skull until the pressure becomes unbearable. It is visceral, it is prolonged, and it lands with the weight of something real, because it is. The scene is a direct recreation of what FBI investigators documented as part of the 1962 M&M murders in the Chicago area, according to court records and investigative reporting. Most notably the work of journalist Nicholas Pileggi, whose 1995 book Casino, Love and Honor in Las Vegas formed the foundation of the screenplay. The real incident involved Chicago outfit enforcer Tony Spilatro and an associate interrogating a man named Billy McCarthy. McCarthy was suspected of involvement in a murder the outfit hadn't sanctioned, and the crew needed a name from him. When conventional intimidation failed, a vice was reportedly used. McCarthy eventually gave up his associate, Jimmy Miraglia. Both men were killed regardless. What Scorsese understood, and what makes the scene so deeply disturbing, is that the horror isn't in the spectacle. It's in the ordinariness. Pesci plays the moment not as a villain's monologue, but as a man performing a tedious task. That creative choice, that boredom, came directly from documented accounts of how Spilatro and his associates actually operated. Court testimony and FBI surveillance records described a crew that treated extreme violence as simply a professional tool. The prop itself was a specially rigged prosthetic. No actors were harmed in its production, but the historical record that inspired it was very real, and Scorsese's decision to include it was a deliberate act of documentary fidelity to what the Chicago mob actually did. Robert De Niro's preparation process is legendary in Hollywood, and for Casino, he went further than most actors would ever consider necessary. The real Sam Ace Rothstein was Frank Lefty Rosenthal, a sports handicapper and a legal bookmaker from Chicago who, according to documented FBI investigations and Nevada Gaming Authority records, secretly ran the Stardust, Fremont, Hacienda, and Marina casinos for the Chicago outfit throughout the 1970s and early 1980s, all without ever holding a Nevada gaming license, because the state gaming board had enough on him to block it permanently. By the time Casino was in production, Rosenthal had relocated to Boca Raton, Florida, effectively exiled from the city he had helped transform. De Niro flew down to meet him. The sessions that followed were extensive, according to multiple production accounts, including interviews De Niro and director Martin Scorsese gave to publications like Rolling Stone and Entertainment Weekly around the film's release. De Niro absorbed not just facts but mannerisms. The particular way Rosenthal held his body when he talked about casino operations. The controlled, executive stillness of a man who believed that projecting calm was itself a form of power, the habit of coordinating his wardrobe with almost military precision. What De Niro translated onto screen wasn't an impression. Ace Rothstein doesn't shout. He doesn't threaten. He manages, monitors, and quietly catalogs every failure around him with the energy of a man who has already calculated exactly how badly things are about to go. That internal pressure, that sense of a perfectionist running out of room, came directly from those Florida meetings with the man who lived it. The casting of Ginger McKenna is one of the more remarkable stories in 1990s Hollywood, and it illustrates something important about how creative decisions at the highest level actually get made, which is often through stubbornness and personality rather than process. The role was genuinely open, according to reporting from the period and Stone's own accounts given in interviews, including a widely referenced 2021 conversation with The Hollywood Reporter. The list of actresses considered for Ginger included Madonna, Nicole Kidman, Uma Thurman, and Michelle Pfeiffer. Pfeiffer reportedly passed. She had famously lost significant weight for her role in Scarface in 1983 and had no interest in returning to that kind of material. Sharon Stone was, at the time, primarily known for Basic Instinct, the 1992 thriller that had made her a star but also narrowed Hollywood's perception of her. She was considered a certain kind of box office attraction, not the kind of actor studios envisioned carrying the emotional devastation that Ginger's arc required. Her own management reportedly encouraged her to avoid it. Stone wanted it desperately. She pursued meetings with Scorsese aggressively. When his office canceled on her twice, she concluded she was being politely ignored and declined a third scheduled meeting, going to dinner instead. Scorsese, who apparently genuinely wanted the meeting, tracked her down personally to make his case. He described the character not as a glamour role, but as a portrait of a woman being destroyed by addiction and circumstance, while the city stripped everything from her. Stone said yes immediately. The result, a Golden Globe win and the only Academy Award nomination of her career. It remains one of the most celebrated performances of the decade. $1 million, in the mid-1990s, spent entirely on clothing. That figure, which has been confirmed in multiple production retrospectives, including the extensive behind-the-scenes documentation produced for the film's anniversary releases, represents what the casino wardrobe department spent dressing the cast, extras, and background players. Costume designer Rita Ryak oversaw the operation, which functioned less like a film department and more like a specialized period archive. De Niro's character Ace Rothstein changes outfits approximately 70 times across the film's running length, wearing around 52 custom-made suits and jackets. Each one was painstakingly constructed to reflect the real Frank Rosenthal's documented style, loud, deliberate, and clashing in a way that was not accidental but strategic. Rosenthal, according to those who knew him and accounts from the time, used his clothing as a form of communication. He wanted people to look at him. He wanted to be impossible to ignore. Ryak and De Niro actually flew to Florida to meet Rosenthal in person for wardrobe research. He opened his personal photo albums, gave them access to his closet, and connected them with the tailors who had made his shirts. The clashing color combinations that make Ace look like a Jackson Pollock painting hosted inside a men's club were all drawn from the real man's actual wardrobe. Sharon Stone's Ginger wore approximately 40 outfits, and Ryak used the wardrobe as a visual timeline of the character's unraveling, polished and architecturally composed in the early scenes, progressively looser and less controlled as her life falls apart. Even background extras wore period-authentic clothes, sourced from vintage archives, and both De Niro and Stone negotiated contract clauses allowing them to keep their full wardrobes at wrap. Here is something that fundamentally changes how you hear the dialogue in Casino. A significant portion of it did not come from a writer's imagination. It came from the federal government's own surveillance records. Nicholas Pileggi, the crime journalist who first broke the real Casino story and co-wrote the screenplay with Scorsese, built both his book and the script on thousands of pages of FBI documentation. The Bureau had been surveilling the Kansas City and Chicago mob families, who controlled the Las Vegas skim operation for years. That surveillance included bugs placed in social clubs, grocery stores, and private residences where mob leadership conducted business. What those transcripts revealed, and what Pileggi incorporated into the film's dialogue was how the actual conversations went, not the elevated, literary speeches of the Godfather films, which are magnificent but are also literature, but the mumbling, interrupting, petty grievance-airing chatter of working criminals who sounded, as Scorsese himself has noted in interviews, like middle managers complaining about the company's bookkeeping. The Piscano grocery store scenes, where elderly mob bosses mutter about the skim and argue over operational details, are reconstructed from actual FBI recordings. The specific rhythms, the way characters talk over each other, the manner in which a mundane disagreement can shift into a death threat without anyone raising their voice. All of it reflects documented behavioral patterns from the real surveillance files. Scorsese gave De Niro, Pesci, and Frank Vincent those wiretap-informed lines, and then encouraged improvisation on top of them. The result is dialogue that feels less performed than overheard. Here is an extraordinary detail about the production context of Casino. When the film released in November 1995, the real casino that had inspired the entire story was still operational, still lit up, still processing chips and counting cards and serving complimentary drinks to gamblers who had no idea they were stepping into a living crime scene. The Tangiers in the film was a legal fiction designed to provide cover, but as Pileggi's book and subsequent journalism made clear, it was essentially a portrait of the Stardust Hotel and Casino. The Stardust was where Frank Rosenthal had operated, where the Chicago outfit had skimmed millions from the count room, and where the FBI had eventually untangled enough of the operation to dismantle it. The Stardust kept operating under new ownership until November of 2006, when it closed permanently. The towers came down in 2007. Today the property is Resorts World Las Vegas, which opened in 2021. Scorsese could not film inside the Stardust for obvious reasons. No casino in the world was going to welcome a film crew making a movie about mob skimming and FBI raids onto its floor. The production instead used the Riviera Hotel and Casino, which made its floor available during the dead hours between 1 and 4 in the morning. Production staff built a replica count room from scratch, since the Riviera wouldn't allow cameras anywhere near its actual one. The result is a film in which the documentary subject was visible from the set, still operating, its neon sign visible from the street where Scorsese's crew was working to recreate what had happened inside it. Most films that carry the words based on a true story play fast and loose with the historical record. Characters get composited, timelines collapse, events that happened over decades get compressed into a single dramatic confrontation. Casino did almost none of this. Frank Lefty Rosenthal became Sam Ace Rothstein. Tony Spilotro became Nicky Santoro. Jerry McGee, Rosenthal's real wife, a former Las Vegas showgirl and hustler, became Ginger McKenna. The arc of her life, including the addiction, the affair with Spilotro, and the fatal overdose in a Los Angeles hotel room in 1982, is represented in the film with minimal dramatization. The financial crimes depicted, the skim operation, the method of moving money out of the count room before it could be officially recorded, the chain of couriers carrying cash back to Midwest mob bosses, are all substantiated in court records. Spilotro's hole-in-the-wall gang, a burglary crew that drilled through walls to rob Las Vegas businesses and residences, was a documented criminal enterprise that eventually became part of the federal case against him. So why change the names at all? According to Pileggi in interviews, the primary reason was Frank Rosenthal himself. He was reportedly interested in some form of compensation for the use of his story and name. When that was not forthcoming to his satisfaction, his name was changed. The man who had been written into Nevada's Black Book of Excluded Persons, banned from every casino in the state, ended up being quietly edited out of his own biography. There is a particular phone call that has become part of Hollywood legend, and it came from James Woods to Martin Scorsese's office during Casino's casting process. Woods, who by 1995 had established himself as one of the most intense and technically gifted character actors in American film, with work in Salvador, Once Upon a Time in America, and Videodrome, supporting that reputation, bypassed the conventional channels of agents and casting meetings entirely. He called Scorsese's office directly and left a message that his representatives later recounted publicly. The substance of it: any role, any time, any location, any salary. That last element, The willingness to work for whatever Scorsese decided to pay was the clearest possible signal that this was not a negotiation. It was a declaration of intent. Scorsese cast him almost immediately as Lester Diamond, Ginger's manipulative ex-boyfriend who drifts in and out of the story like a human liability, extracting money and causing chaos. It is not a large role in terms of screen time, but Woods understood precisely what it required and turned Lester into one of the film's most memorable presences. He is oily in a very specific way, not cartoonishly villainous, but genuinely charming in the predatory manner of someone who has spent years perfecting the art of making dangerous requests sound reasonable. Scorsese gave him room to develop the character's exterior, the wardrobe, the jewelry, the particular brand of Vegas-adjacent charisma, and Woods delivered someone who functions almost as a dark mirror to De Niro's controlled Ace. Where Ace controls everything, Lester controls nothing but convinces everyone otherwise. Casino's narrative structure is more sophisticated than it appears on first viewing, and it rewards the kind of close attention that Scorsese's films consistently demand from their audiences. The film opens with De Niro's Ace establishing himself as the primary narrator, walking the audience through the mechanics of casino operations with the confidence of a man who has been the smartest person in every room he has ever entered. His narration is organized, precise, and even a little professorial. Vegas, as Ace presents it in the film's first act, is a system, and systems, he implies, can be managed by the right mind. Then Pesci's Nicky enters the narrative and enters the narration. He begins to take over portions of the voiceover, competing with Ace for control of the story the same way the real Spilatro competed with Rosenthal for control of their Las Vegas operation. As the film progresses, and both men's lives deteriorate, the structure of the narration itself becomes unstable. The editing accelerates. The chronology becomes less linear. The payoff comes at the film's conclusion. Nicky Santoro narrates right up until the moment of his death in the cornfield scene, and then stops mid-sentence. His voice simply cuts out. The silence that follows is one of the most elegantly constructed moments in the film, because it makes the narrative itself perform the death. The story doesn't tell you Nicky is gone. The story demonstrates it by his inability to continue telling it. Film scholars, including those writing in the Journal of Film and Video, have noted that this technique, which Scorsese first explored in Goodfellas, reached its most refined form in Casino, with the unreliability of both narrators, both men describing their own competence while simultaneously demonstrating their failures, becomes the film's central dramatic irony. Casino includes a car bombing scene involving Ace Rothstein that functions as a major dramatic turning point. The car explodes. Ace survives, and the film suggests that this survival is the beginning of the end for his time in Las Vegas. What the film doesn't tell you is that the real version of this event turned on a piece of factory engineering, so unlikely it has the quality of dark comedy. On October 4th, 1982, Frank Rosenthal left a restaurant in Las Vegas, got into his 1981 Cadillac Eldorado, and turned the ignition. Someone had placed a bomb near the fuel tank. The explosion was significant enough to destroy the car entirely. Rosenthal survived with relatively minor burns. The reason, documented in subsequent investigations and reported in detail by journalists covering the aftermath. That specific model of Cadillac Eldorado had a known handling defect. To address it, General Motors had retrofitted the vehicle with the steel plate positioned beneath the driver's seat. When the bomb detonated, that plate, installed not for any safety reason, but to correct a balance problem, redirected the force of the explosion away from the driver's compartment. Rosenthal was saved by a quality control patch for an unrelated engineering flaw. He climbed out of the burning car, told witnesses that someone was trying to kill him, and declined to provide the police with any useful information about who that might have been. The bombing was never solved. Rosenthal left Las Vegas not long afterward, eventually settling in Florida. The mob, which had reportedly ordered the hit because Rosenthal had become a liability, failed to kill him. An assembly line in Detroit, incidentally, did not. Martin Scorsese's approach to authenticity on Casino was, by all accounts, obsessive. He hired real casino dealers, real pit bosses, consultants who had spent decades on the floors of Las Vegas casinos and could tell whether a hand movement was genuine or whether an actor was approximating. The production wanted the casino sequences to function as a kind of operational documentary, capturing not just the look, but the actual procedural reality of how these places ran. That worked fine until the crew tried to film cheating. Casino operations, particularly from the era the film depicts, were plagued by player cheating schemes, card counting, signaling between partners, past posting, and more sophisticated mechanical manipulations. These are documented in gaming industry literature and in the files of Nevada's Gaming Control Board, which maintains historical records of cheating methods identified and prosecuted over the decades. But knowing that these methods exist in the historical record is different from knowing how to perform them convincingly on camera. When the production approached real professional cheats, men who had spent careers extracting money from casinos through deception, the answer was consistently no. As the film's producers later acknowledged in interviews, this was one of the most stubborn problems of the entire production. The reason is straightforward. A professional cheat's entire livelihood depends on casino security, not knowing his methods. Demonstrating those methods on a major studio film, one that would be seen by every pit boss and surveillance operative in Las Vegas by opening weekend, would be professional suicide. No consulting fee was worth that exposure. The film, for all its documented authenticity across dozens of operational details, left this particular gap unfilled. The casino floor looks right. The count room looks right. The cheating, by the accounts of the people who actually knew how it was done, stays deliberately vague. In the cornfield execution scene near casino's conclusion, Nicky Santoro and his brother are beaten to death with baseball bats and buried in the dirt. The man swinging one of those bats is Frank Vincent, an actor with deep roots in both Scorsese's filmography and Joe Pesci's personal life. Vincent and Pesci had been friends since the 1960s, when both men were working the New Jersey nightclub circuit. Pesci as a singer, Vincent as a drummer. They met on the same stages, remained close for decades, and their friendship eventually fed directly into one of the more unusual running threads in Martin Scorsese's crime films. In Raging Bull, 1980, Pesci's character physically confronts Vincent's. In Goodfellas, 1990, Pesci's Tommy DeVito beats Frank Vincent's Billy Bats to death in the film's most notorious scene, triggered by the line, now deeply embedded in American pop culture, about going home to get your shine box. The killing of Billy Bats is presented as one of the central acts of escalation that eventually destroys the gang. In Casino, Scorsese reversed the dynamic entirely. This time, Vincent holds the bat. Pesci goes in the ground. What makes this more than just a clever directorial callback is that both men apparently brought their genuine friendship to the reversal. The cornfield scene has a quality that goes beyond what the script requires, partly because the two actors understood exactly what Scorsese was doing, and understood it as a kind of private joke